I am at this point in life where I believe that humans are undisputably, irrefutably, unequivocally carnivores. And it's basically due to the fact that I've seen these truths that I can't unsee. There's a beautiful quote by Ralph Emerson, I believe it goes, "The mind, once stretched by a new idea, can never return to its original dimensions." And that's where I want feedback in this video, because I was vegan for years and it didn't agree with me. It didn't help me feel my best. Like, for perspective, in my personal life, I've been eating a carnivore diet for 2 or 3 months now. That's it. And already the results have been life-changing. I don't know how else to put it. I've put on 30 pounds. And I know that's not good news for most people, but for me, I needed it. And I really struggled to gain weight plant-based eating, okay? I'm much closer to my ideal body composition now than I ever have been for many, many years on this healing journey, okay? I have more energy than I've had in years. And it's not just physical benefits. Like, my mental faculties are sharper, they are crisper. I feel more clarity, I feel more peace, I feel happier, my mood is improving, my libido is improving, I'm sleeping better. I'm sorry, it's just exciting to share all these amazing changes I've experienced in my body. The last time I recorded a video in this shirt, like, you can literally see the difference in my face, okay? The last video was about a month into carnivore, and now I'm maybe 2 or 3 months in, okay? You can literally see the difference in my face, in the vitality that I have in my whole body, okay? So why am I sharing all this? Well, obviously I've come to this video from a bit of a biased perspective, okay? But at the same time, I haven't, right? Like, I really wanted this video to spark conversation, okay? Because I want to stay open. You have to understand that I was vegan for many years, and like, I'll probably get in the comments, "Oh, you were never vegan." But I was. I went vegan for the reasons most people do. With the welfare of the planet, of the animals, and above all, I really thought it was the holy grail for what humans are, designed to be eating to feel optimal. And my own experience has taught me otherwise. And there was just certain questions I've always had around plant-based eating. And if it was optimal, then how are these kind of truths existing in my mind? So in this video, I want to share a bunch of ideas I have. And if anyone has any feedback or answers to these probing questions, I pray that you enlighten me, okay? One last thing before we get started. I will note that, you might suggest that humans are actually omnivores because we can, eat plants as well. And honestly, it really just depends on how you want to define it, okay? Because yes, I grant we can eat plants. However, there's no actual need for it. We can survive, and we see populations living healthfully, almost excluding plants entirely from their diet, from time to time, here and there, seasonally, okay? But like, they're not essential. There's no essential carbohydrates. So in my mind, we are carnivores because that's all we actually need to thrive. All right, so the way I'm gonna frame this video is like this. I ask the question, if we are not carnivores and we are designed to be eating more predominantly plants, then why, etc. Okay, here we go. Okay, first up, if humans aren't carnivores, then why is meat the only food we can live solely off of? If we're looking at food, like one singular food that we can live on exclusively, the only food that fits that criteria is meat. There's no plant you can live exclusively on, just meat. If humans aren't carnivores by nature, why would that be the case? And further, kind of expanding on this idea, why is it that the ratio of amino acids found in meat are in near perfect balance for the needs and requirements of our body? To me, this seems a little bit beyond coincidence, almost as if our bodies actually evolutionarily adapted to have our needs met by the most available food source that was available to us for most of our existence as a species. Like, to me, that makes sense, right? And, going even further on this, why is it that people with the most severe autoimmune conditions oftentimes only find relief when they switch to an all-meat diet, right? Like, why would it be, if we aren't carnivores, that the people that are the most sick find the most relief when they exclude plants entirely from their diet? I mean, again, I'm not trying to provide answers, but my little theory to this is that our bodies aren't designed to digest plants. And those who are very strong can do it and live pretty well on them. But those who are weaker, like myself for all those years, we don't have the luxury of being able to digest plants. So you see these people with these autoimmune conditions, they go to an all-meat diet, and oftentimes an all red meat diet, just ruminant animals, what I think is the most biologically appropriate meat for humans, red meat, lamb, bison, beef, those sorts of things, their symptoms either drastically improve or are alleviated altogether, provided that they stick on this diet. And then oftentimes they'll bring in a couple plants and feel a lot worse. So if humans aren't carnivores, why would all of that be the case?
What are you doing?
I can't help it. I need the meat. The baby needs the meat.
If humans are not carnivores, why is meat so satisfying? Why is it so delicious? To suggest that humans aren't carnivore is to suggest that humans are the only animal whose natural instincts betray them, right? Like, every animal on the face of the earth, their palate is specifically designed to crave the flavors of foods that are going to nourish their body. That's how taste works. That's why things taste good, because we are attracted to them and we know, okay, eat that is safe, that's gonna be nourishing for my body. And things that don't taste good, we're like, oh, spit that out, right? I don't want that. Now, so you might think this is a trivial statement, but the fact that meat is so delicious to our palate suggests that it's exactly what our body wants to be nourished fully, okay? And of course, this is a very nuanced topic for a few reasons. The first I'll mention is that we live in a society where most of the food at our grocery store that is available to us in unlimited abundance was never actually available to us for the majority of our time as a species. And this confuses things, right? We have this food that is engineered to be hyper palatable. So we can't completely make a blanket statement that everything that we want to put in our mouth is going to be good for us. But if we look at only natural foods that were actually available to the human species for the majority of our time, we can see that of those natural foods, meat is the most delicious of them all. We also have sugar cravings, but this is likely, I think, because sugar wasn't widely available, especially like it is now, for the millennia that we've been becoming into ourselves, right? And so when we do have an opportunity in the past, we would have gorged on it, but we never would have had access to it in the abundance we do now. So there are little nuances. Other people might say, well, I'm not attracted to meat at all. I don't have a taste for it. And that might be the case. And I think, humans can be very conditioned. If you've been vegetarian your whole life, you would lose that taste for meat. And obviously the mentality of, I don't want to eat an animal, it ruins the sense for you. It convinces you to be repulsed by the idea. There's this old thing that the plant-based community says, where it's like, okay, if you take a kid and give them an apple or a live chicken, it's going to eat the apple and just chill with the chicken. And you know what? Okay, fair enough. But if you give that same kid an apple and a juicy burger patty, just pure fatty meat, I guarantee they're going to go for the fatty meat. And that is a child with a pure palate that is ready to eat what is going to be nourishing for its body, making a clear decision. Okay, I remember when I was a kid, you eat the soup and you kind of pick out the meat chunks because that's what your body wants the most. What is desirable is nourishing. Surely you're not going to suggest that even though every other animal can eat with that natural intuition, humans can't. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Okay, so changing gears a little, let's look at anatomy, all right? Why if we're not carnivores, does meat digest so perfectly? And further, why have humans lost nearly all of our adaptations and the actual mechanisms in our body to digest plants well? If you look at the great apes, and it doesn't matter if you prescribe to the theory of evolution or you believe in divine creation, you're either understanding we evolved from a common ancestor or you're just comparing ourselves to our closest genetic animal on the planet. And you can see that like the great apes have different digestive systems to allow them to digest plant fibers. Apes and other herbivorous animals can actually digest cellulose. They can digest plant fibers. Humans can't do this. I mean, technically speaking, no vertebrate can digest plant fiber, but they have gut bacteria, okay? Apes have hindgut fermentation. They have a cecum. Okay, we can clearly see in our anatomy that we have an appendix, which is an atrophied cecum. We have been losing these abilities to digest plants effectively. And this is very important, okay, because nature is very efficient with how it manages its resources. And the evolution of a species is always going to continue to evolve attributes that favor its survival, okay? If you have a particular attribute that favors your ability to survive, those genes get passed down. So anything that doesn't get passed down is not by accident, it's incredibly intentional. So to me, the only logical explanation for why we would have lost these adaptations to digest plants is because we weren't using them, and nature is smart. You know, if you don't use your arm for a year, it atrophies, it withers, it shrinks because we are managing our resources efficiently. So while we can gain some nourishment from plants, if it was optimal for our species, why would we not have these adaptations to make it more sustainable and more beneficial for our bodies? Like it doesn't make sense to me, okay? So continuing down the rabbit hole of anatomy, why is our stomach pH so acidic and much more ideal for digesting meat? If we were meant to be digesting plants, why would it be so acidic? It's much closer to the pH of scavenger animals that prey on carrion than it is herbivorous animals. And the commonly accepted theory for this is that our first taste of the juicy meats was from carrion, was from breaking apart bones and eating bone marrow. So it actually makes a lot of sense as to why our stomach pH would be so acidic. You know, why do we have such a big gallbladder for emulsifying fat if the way that people tend to operate well on a plant-based diet is a high carb, low fat? And why would our body favor high carb, high sugar and maintain such a large organ for digesting fat? And like we have 4 organs working in concert just to digest fat. And yet to suggest we're not carnivores suggests that, I mean, okay, you could eat a high fat vegan diet, although it's not really as easy given that most of your calories come from carbohydrates. Like why would we base our eating in that way and yet our body would favor these organs that all want to assimilate and digest and emulsify fat? To wrap up this point, it's like we can see from our anatomy that we're genetically adapted to be on a more carnivorous style of eating. And this is very important because if we were meant to favor plants, we would have these adaptations that other animals have that do have plants as the predominant source of their calories, but we don't. If humans aren't carnivores, then why did our brains need to develop to be so big and complex? And more interestingly, why is it that at the start of the agricultural revolution, we can actually see our bodies start to physically degenerate? Our stature got smaller, and subsequently, our brain size actually got smaller, right? Surely, if plants were optimal for us, we would have seen the opposite of this happen. We would have seen our vitality increase. We would have seen our stature continue to grow as it was. But the reality is we don't see that. And to me, my kind of explanation for this that makes sense to me is like, you don't need a lot of brain power to pick a fruit from a tree, okay? And, you know, we can look at the great apes and see that they are very intelligent compared to most animals, but they pale in comparison to humans. Like our cerebral cortex, our brain size in general, I think it's 3 times the size of theirs. Okay, this is a huge difference in our ability to think. And I think using this brain that I have, that the only thing that really makes sense in terms of accomplishing when it comes to that evolutionary advantage, again, Mother Nature is so deliberate with the evolution of the attributes of a species in favorable ways. We needed this brain power to make tools, to strategize, to track and hunt these big game animals, and I don't see any other application for it. You can't argue that we needed these big brains to learn how to start agriculture or whatever, because our brains were at the pinnacle of their size before agriculture even began. So yeah, I don't know. Guys, if you have any answers to these questions, please enlighten me.
A delicious power breakfast. That's Cheerios.
Okay, so let's dial back to more recent history, okay? If humans are not carnivores, then why is it that in the last 100 years, we've seen a steady decrease due to a lot of propaganda and fraudulent information? We've seen this steady decrease in saturated fat, which comes predominantly from fatty meats, from red meats, but we also see the decrease in butter, in whole raw milk, in all of these things that I think are natural human foods. They are all on the decline, okay? And in theory, if our health was inversely related, we should see an increase in our health, right? Because we're consuming more plants. But in reality, we see the opposite. And I know this is just correlation, it doesn't necessarily imply causation. There's a lot of other factors, including lack of sleep, stress, the toxicity and pollution in our environment. But I don't think it should be dismissed. It's very interesting. Among this trend of demonizing red meat, so, Ansel Keys put out his 7 Nation study, which was just cherry-picked information of the 23 countries he actually studied to just try and demonize red meat. There's been a lot of fraudulent activity going on in the dietary guidelines world, right? So in 1977, the FDA posted new dietary guidelines, which we can now see. It's been proven that this was based on fraudulent scientific literature. The sugar industry paid off the scientists to put out fraudulent studies to essentially demonize saturated fat and exonerate sugar from any blame for, at the time, the big thing was heart disease, but all problems in general. So what's interesting is in 1977, from that point on, in theory, Americans drastically decreased their consumption of saturated fat in favor of more sugar in their diet. So if this was ideal, more carbs, less fat, we should see a reduction in the rates of heart disease. But in reality, I think over the next 20 years, it tripled. It went substantially up. What's interesting though, and this is a bit of my own conspiracy theorism here, but it's kind of obvious, I think, the rates of heart disease went up at that point, but the deaths from heart disease continued to actually steadily decline. What does that tell us? It tells us that the pharmaceutical company is winning, right? Because there's no money in dead people, but there's also no money in healthy people. The money is right in the middle. And these dietary guidelines seem to fit the bill because people weren't dying from heart disease, but its prevalence was actually increasing. Anyways, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. If humans are not carnivores, why is it that indigenous populations seen all over the globe always favor animal foods as the predominant source of their calories? Why is that? Why is that, okay? There are many cultures observed that actually lived almost exclusively on meat, at least for portions of the year, and carbs and sugars were very minimal in their diet. Some indigenous groups included them a little bit more and they knew how to properly prepare them, but unanimously across the board, when it came to the strength of their warriors, the fertility of their women, animal foods were sacred to them. Now, why would that be the case if this was not linked to some benefit that they could clearly see? And it's important to note that they lived healthfully. They didn't suffer from the alphabet of diseases that we have in the Western world. They were called the diseases of the West for that specific reason. You know, if humans aren't carnivores, why do we see indigenous populations thriving, living in a carnivorous or at least hyper-carnivorous way? This probably should have been included in the anatomy part, but if humans aren't carnivores, why is it that when we eat a more meat-based diet, our jaws, our sinus cavities, our face actually develops fully? Our wisdom teeth are actually able to come in because my thoughts are that we have the necessary nourishment, the nutrition, the nutrients, the vitamins, minerals, and we also have the resistance training of chewing. There's a lot of misinformation, I think, about wisdom teeth out there. But if you look at, there's actual populations, there's physical, anecdotal evidence of cultures that ate more meat and their faces develop properly. They have strong jawlines and wisdom teeth that actually come in and don't cause a problem. This, I think, is very important to consider. If humans aren't carnivores and are therefore designed to metabolize carbs and sugar on a more plant-based way of eating, why is it that babies eating their most pure, the most optimal form of food that you could ever conceive for humans, that being breast milk, babies drinking breast milk are actually living in a ketogenic state, burning fat, burning ketones as the predominant source of their fuel. They aren't burning sugar and carbs like is commonly thought we're supposed to do as our natural metabolism. In fact, most animals in nature run in this ketogenic state and are actually fat burning, okay? A gorilla, for example, yes, it eats leaves and berries, but it's not running on carbs. It's actually utilizing its gut fermentation, and the bacteria are breaking down the sugars and the cellulose, and then they're in turn absorbing saturated fat, pure saturated fatty acids. A cow eats grass, which is 5% fat, but they actually digest the gut bacteria, which allows them to digest 85, 90% fat in their diet, okay? It's seen all around nature that animals are living in this ketogenic state, and babies, human babies, eating the most natural food mirror that, right? So why do we think that as we get older, we're supposed to shift into this sugar metabolism? I don't get it. All right, guys, I'm getting to the end of this rant, but here's a really good one. If humans aren't carnivores, why do we have one of the best endurance running capabilities on the entire planet, right? We're up there with dogs, horses, wolves are dogs, and ostriches, and camels. Like, this is incredible. And again, like I said earlier, evolutionary attributes don't happen by accident. For something to stick with a species and prove to shape the course of its genetics, it has to be very important. And the only application that I see for distance endurance running is the predation of animals. Like, it really does very little in terms of surviving from other animals that are predating us. You can't distance outrun a lion. You know, lions, tigers, and bears, they're all faster than us. So the only purpose I see this serving is our ability to hunt and track animals. And we see tribes still to this day utilizing this attribute. If we weren't carnivores, why would we have this incredible skill set? You know, it's rare among the animal kingdom. And finally, maybe some of the most conclusive evidence of a human's diet. Why is it that if we look at stable isotope studies, we can see that looking at bone collagen from fossils of the last, let's say, 300,000 years that we've been Homo sapiens, we can see the makeup of these early humans' diets. And it's always seen to be 80% or more large ruminant animals. It shows that we're the apex predator of our time at any given time in history. We have a higher carnivore rating than the other carnivores around in the same time period. How do you reconcile that if we're not carnivores? Whew. Anyways, guys, in reference to all of these questions, I am honestly looking for answers. These are all the questions that were introduced to me, that fell on my lap, that really made me question the diet that I had put on a pedestal for so long and question and think, well, maybe actually we're not meant to eat plants for all of the reasons that I've just stated. So yeah, my mind has been stretched, and it's going to have a lot of difficulty returning to its original dimension. So please, if you have any answers to these questions, leave a comment, enlighten me.